Hey everyone, welcome once again to another episode of Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live Fireside Chat. It's been a couple of weeks since I've seen you guys. Great to see you guys again. Thank you for joining us. If you're live, please drop a note in our comment section around where you're from. Love to hear from you. And if you're post-recording again, feel free to drop questions over to myself or my guest today, whom I will introduce in a second. And she has quite the following, I was saying, because once I announced that she was going to be my guest, I had a lot of people ping me saying that, you know her? And I said, yes, sort of, but they're going to be tuning in. So hopefully if you're tuning in now, please drop a note. We'd love to hear from you. And again, today, as always, this is a series about personal career journeys, not intended to talk too much about the technical aspect of what my guests do, although if they would like to share with, that's great. But I think what's missing in LinkedIn is really the idea of people's personal stories around them sharing about their lives and how they got to this point in their career. So for those of you who are interested in kind of going the path of some of the large companies like Google, if you're interested in just sort of hearing what people's different journeys have been like and how it might help you along, this is where you are. So thanks so much for coming. So let me just introduce my guest today. Her name is Natasha Walji, and she is the Managing Director at Google Canada, leading the telecom, tech, and public sector. Previously, she was a McKinsey consultant and a software developer. Natasha has actively served the community for 20 plus years, focused on disaster relief, poverty alleviation, public health, and co-founded an organization for children with disabilities. She is an angel investor and is an investment committee member for Blue Ivy Ventures. Natasha holds a Bachelor of Science Computer Science degree from University of Victoria, an MBA from Yale, and a Master of Sustainability Leadership from Cambridge. I think that's what it is. Natasha is recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women. So Natasha, without further ado, thank you so much for joining the show today. I know you're really busy, and I'm just honored to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Simeon, and for doing this. It's so great that you take a moment to understand people's backstory on their career. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, and a lot of the clients that I work with love to hear other people's stories. It's just that they don't have opportunity to sit down and have a coffee chat with other leaders, right? So it's great to have you on. Natasha, so I guess just to start off with, for people who don't know you or who are familiar with you but not familiar with your backstory, what is it that you do today in your role, and kind of just generally speaking, what does a day in life look like, if there is one?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently at Google. I've been at Google for 12 years, and I'm on the ad side of Google. And so I lead a few industries, including telecom, tech, and public sector. And what that means is I work with large customers in the private sector in those industries, and I help them effectively drive sales, build their brand, and digitally transform through marketing. And that's what I do on the private sector side. Now, I also lead our public sector business, which has been a huge source of inspiration. Mm-hmm. So we do work with our federal and provincial governments, and our role there is to help our governments communicate with citizens at scale and help citizens make informed choices to improve their quality of life. So it's been a very inspiring industry to be part of through COVID, right, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And has brought me a lot of day-to-day inspiration. I think your other question is, what does a day in a life look like at Google?
For you as a person, you wake up at what time? What do you do? It's just, I'm kidding. What is it?
Yeah, so I have a 6-year-old daughter, so she's obviously a huge part of my day and my life. And so, my mornings, I try and get up before her and meditate, to be honest, just to get some semblance of my own day. And I do get to wake up I try at least a half an hour to an hour before her to work and meditate and kind of set the stage for my own day and set the tone there. Usually, drop her off to school and then get to work. And then obviously my day-to-day that can look quite different at Google depending on what's on the docket for that day between client meetings. Spend a lot of time also with my team. It's been really inspiring hiring a lot of people through COVID and actually just onboarding them into our culture at Google. So that's been great. And just being very connected to my customers. I think it's been so interesting to hear what's top of mind and some of the challenges and opportunities that they've seen through COVID. I can, it's quite the range of customers that I work with, including Canadian companies that have, that focus on global markets, to Canadian telcos, to, governments, of course. So that can be quite varied. And then, from there and pick up my daughter usually. And then, there goes the evening. You're into the evening at that point. But yeah, that gives you a sense.
And so of all the facets of your leadership and plus the fact that you have a child who's 6 years old, where do you derive the most inspiration as far as what drives you? So I'm sure your daughter is the inspiration. I guess from a career perspective, where you are now, from a leadership perspective, what kind of excites you the most? You said public sector is a big piece of there, but and relationship with clients, etc. What kind of gets you up in the morning and really gets you excited to go to work?
Yeah, I think, Simeon, that's the ultimate question for all of us, right? What's our why and what inspires us? So I love that question. It actually, we had a team offsite yesterday at work, and this came up a lot. Like, how do we keep our teams inspired? And I think that connection to our why is really important. And I was very blessed to learn my why at a very young age. And so I love the quote by Mark Twain, which is the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And so I discovered my why when I was, call it 17 years old or so. And that fueled my whole career. So I know this is kind of going back in time. But when I was in high school, I actually struggled a lot in math in high school. And as you can hear from my career journey, I have a very quantitative career.
Yeah.
And so I was very fortunate when I was struggling in math. My mom was a single parent at that time. We couldn't really afford math tutoring. I happened to meet this amazing math professor in my community who took me under his wing and actually gave me math tutoring services for free.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm still in touch with him today. He's still one of my mentors in my life, which is amazing. I'm still in touch with him. I just spoke to him 2 weeks ago, but all to say I was very grateful to him because he spent that time on me and recognized that I needed that extra support. And so anyhow, he turned me from a struggling student to an A student in math, and I was helping him tutor other students for free, which is great.
Wow.
But I think was, there's a couple things he did for me. He obviously built my confidence when I really needed it as a teen, because obviously there's a lot of distractions when you're a teenager. Right. And then I think the second thing that was really important that he did for me, really encouraged me to study computer science when there weren't a lot of women going into computer science at that time. Right. And, the last thing he did for me was really ignite that why. And so one day he was sitting with me, after I got better at math, obviously, and said to me, I want you to think about how you'll use your education and knowledge to serve others. So I want you to think about how you'll use your education knowledge to serve others. And that was like a big aha moment for me. That was a huge breakthrough in my education. It just made me realize why I wanted to work hard, why I wanted to set the bar of excellence high, was just to kind of build that platform to serve and make a bigger difference. And I think that's what gives me inspiration every day at work today, is feeling very grateful for the platform that I have to serve and make a difference. And, through the work that I do directly, or even, through people that I work with, I feel like I feel very responsible and very, very grateful to have that platform to serve.
Right. Yeah. And if anyone's listening and you have your idea of why, would love to hear that. Drop a note in the chat about that. That is really the question, though, at the end of the day. And some people take a long time to find that why. And, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a matter of hopefully you do find that eventually. And some people kind of take almost the whole career to figure out at the end of the day what they're, when you kind of tip over a little bit to 55 plus, it becomes more of a question about legacy and kind of what you want to leave behind. And, have you done all that you want to do, and have you made the impact that you want to have? So let me go back to that 17-year-old Natasha then. What was it that made you insecure? Why was it that teenage years, was it just math, or was it sort of,
life? I mean, to be honest, I think for young women, I think there's a lot of insecurity that you have growing up in your teen years. There's just a lot going on. Hormones,
Yeah.
friendships, peer sets, and I really empathize with the next generation with social media.
Right.
I was very lucky I didn't have social media at that time.
Yeah.
And even without that, it was a time of insecurity and just finding yourself. And, you have different peer circles and what's in fashion and what's cool.
Hmm.
Have people have different perspectives on. And I think, struggling academically compounded that for me. It's
Hmm.
already an awkward stage of life. And then when you're not doing well academically, given that I come from an Indian family, you're expected to do well in school and especially math. I think that really did impact my self-esteem at that point. But again, I was just so fortunate. I met that math professor when I was 16, and he turned around my whole academic career in a year. And
Right.
so a year later, I exited high school with like straight A's and then was able to
Wow.
be in a totally different trajectory in life, actually, because of finding him. So I just
Right.
want to emphasize the importance of great mentors. And
Yes.
his
That's
name
a
is
key.
Nahir Shivji. Like they're so important. And
That's key.
yeah, it's so key, right? If he didn't find me at that stage in my life, I don't know that I'd have the career I have today. So I'm just so grateful to him for that time
Hmm.
and energy he put into me.
And what was it about mathematics that helped you do that? Because could it have been anything else? Was it math? Was it the quantitative structure that helped you to structure other things, or was it just because that happened to be the thing that you were not confident about that you overcame?
Yeah, and I don't know if gender plays a role in that, right? I'm not sure if gender played a role in that at that stage, but
Mhm.
I think the his involvement was very specific. Like I feel like in math, sometimes you have hurdles that you need to have breakthroughs on, and that one-on-one attention and focus can really help you break through and get
Mhm.
the framework, get the structure, and then it's like you're off to the races. That's kind of what happened for me. Because then I was doing like advanced calculus and stuff like that. But if you don't get
Wow.
some of well, I mean, everybody has that option to do it in high school, but I probably wouldn't have got to advanced calculus in high school had I not had that support. So
Mhm.
again, just really thankful for that and the one-on-one. And we all learn in different ways. And that's why I think that one-on-one support can be so key. And I'm sure many people have struggled through school at different moments. We just aren't
Yeah.
lucky enough to get the support always in the right moment. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I have my oldest daughter is 14, and she is kind of going into that stage of, you can see the transformation. So I was going to, okay, you said that you found your why early on. So what was it about that experience with that professor in mathematics that it was your why in math, or what was the why that you found?
yeah, the why for me is like, how can you use your education and knowledge to serve others?
Okay.
That
Okay.
was my why. And like, I think that at every major career decision, every academic decision, like what master's degree program to do, I asked that fundamental question: what would give me a bigger platform to serve and make a difference?
Hmm.
And that's been a huge guiding force in my life. It's unlocked doors. I've connected with people that I'm always amazed at the people I've been able to connect with, and
Hmm.
the roles that I've been in. And I actually shared this with I actually have also been a goal setter, a big goal setter since I was 17. I actually have my goal setting book right on my shelf over here behind me that I found the other day, which did make me laugh out loud because the goals I had in life, which one of them was apparently owning a Mont Blanc pen. I'm like, I don't know why that was, but that was one of my 20 goals. Anyhow, I don't have one of those pens, but tells you where I was at that point. But I've been a big goal setter since I was 17, and I've
Yeah.
had like a rolling 5-year plan since then. I've been a big vision boarder since I was in my 20s. And I've had, a strong sense of like goal setting after I had my daughter too.
Hmm.
I have
Hmm.
that as my go north. So I think that's been very clarifying for me in my career. And
Yeah.
so, for example, when I had a new manager, 5 years ago, and we were having a career conversation, I actually walked her through my vision board and what I was hoping to do in my life, which is how many people I hope to serve in my life, et cetera. And so when we were thinking about our business and who should work on public sector, she's like, you came to mind because understanding policy and how governments work, that will be really important if you want to make a big difference. So,
Right.
it does
Gotcha.
dovetail into your career as well. It can,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're lucky enough to find a company that can do that with you.
Right. So when you graduated from university, you did the degree in computers. Um, well, how did you make your decision about what you would do next? As far as the maximal impact and stuff like that. And when you went to McKinsey, obviously it's the corporate world. But what were your decisions that you had to make, and how did you make them? What was your criteria?
Yeah, so I think so after undergrad, it was really interesting. Even though I graduated with a 4.0, I wasn't getting the same interviews that my male classmates were getting. Like my
Oh,
male classmates were being flown to Silicon Valley, getting interviews with the big tech companies at that time. I wasn't getting interviews. And so that
Wow.
was just, I guess, the nature of the time. But I was very excited
Wow.
about working at Deloitte because it was a good combination of business and tech. So I was a systems consultant at that time, a systems integrator, actually.
Right.
That was great because I got to also use my business skills as well. I did a minor in business, and
Right.
that was really good. But I actually, 2 years in, my dad needed a software developer to lead
Okay.
his team. So I actually I actually one day walked into Deloitte 2 years in and just resigned. And the partner was so surprised. He's like, "Why are you leaving? You've got a good trajectory here." And I was like, "Look, my dad really needs a software developer. I think I can really help out." And resigned and then went to work for my dad for a year in Atlanta. And I loved that experience because I learned so much working with my dad. And I had to lead that software development team that basically thought I didn't know anything because I was female and reported to my dad. He was leading the company at the time.
Right. Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I guess the decision driver there was like, again, where can I have the most impact and where can I learn the most? That was a big part
Mhm.
of also, I'd say, my early decision drivers for me where could I learn at an accelerated rate to build my toolkit of skills to then have a greater impact longer term. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important when you're, earlier on. And that's also fueled some of my lateral moves in my career as well, is that I have made lateral moves sometimes, not an upgrade in level or anything like that, because
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
recognize the opportunity to learn, build new skills, and then hopefully add that to my toolkit to then drive bigger impact longer term. So that role that I had with my dad, I mean, I had the chance to lead a team. We launched a product to market. I mean, it was such a great learning experience. And then I went off to business school after that.
Right.
Yeah. And then I can come back to McKinsey later if you'd like.
Yeah. No. No. I'm wondering. Did when were you at Deloitte?
Oh, right after undergrad. So
Which was what years? Because
oh yeah, 2000 to 2002. Wow. So long ago.
all right, so we didn't overlap because I was there from 2003 2006. Okay.
Oh, I just missed you.
Yeah, I thought for a minute maybe that's why I knew you, but okay, great. Well, you left behind a great footprint. So,
I
so there
don't
you
know
go.
about that. Well, I worked with probably a lot of colleagues that you and I had in common at that. I were
Yeah.
you in tech practice as well?
No, I was in strategy and operations. Yeah.
Okay. So we would have been
Yeah.
like next
So
door neighbors.
I remember very clearly those are some of the best days of my life. So it's also the same year I got married. So
Oh, congrats. That's
yeah,
great.
that I had started my first job out of MBA. Anyway, not about me. I had a so and that lateral move comment that you made there is a very important one that I'd like my audience to hear about because it's part of your vision board, right? Oftentimes we're confronted with, okay, well, here's an opportunity. Maybe you get a call from a headhunter or something like that. Opportunity comes up. Your immediate spidey senses are like, okay, is it a promotion? Number one. And number two, is it going to pay more? Right. And then all of a sudden that factors in. I think what you said about the lateral move in order to learn so that you can have maximize your impact is really important and key because I think especially in this economy, there's a real additional need to learn. You really have to learn and kind of almost diversify yourself as far as things don't happen the way that they used to even 2 years ago, right? So um, that's a really great example of what you said. When you it takes a lot of gumption, a lot of guts to be able to leave a corporation and help your dad. Uh, and you made several observations here now about gender and the fact that opportunities didn't come up as readily as it seemed to. How did that how did that make you feel? How did that form your personality? What did you do with that? Like, how do you process that?
Yeah, I think I focused on meritocracy first and foremost. That's a big like ethic in my community, and I think that's so important to
Yeah.
just have the skill set and just really focus on, building that expertise because
Mhm.
it'll be hard to be overlooked if you're in the right place. And then I guess I saw it as an advantage over time because it's like a differentiator if you are different, maybe it could be a differentiator over time is having
Right.
that expertise and not being like everyone else. And
Hmm.
then I often think about this quote, and I think it's from Thich Nhat Hanh, this quote, which is like, when a flower doesn't grow, nobody asks what's wrong with the flower. They ask what's wrong with the environment. And I
Mm.
think this is so important for people. Like, I believe everyone has gifts, magical gifts, and not everyone's in the right
Mhm.
environment to thrive.
Right.
And so I've really been drawn to companies that are highly meritocratic, like
Mhm.
Deloitte, McKinsey, Google, highly meritocratic environments where your gender, your background, none of that really matters. It's like, what have you done for me lately? What are the results you can
Right.
drive and the
Right.
impact you can have? And that's more important than anything else. And so I think that's allowed me to flourish and thrive. being in those environments and then having amazing bosses like the one I have now, to just support and nurture that in me, right? We all have strengths and development areas,
Right.
but having that support, I think, has been key.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, the meritocracy piece is tough though sometimes, right? Because you work really hard, almost as hard, if not harder than other people who might, for whatever reason, have an advantage over you that may not be based on merits, right? And I think we're facing that even now to this day quite a bit in different arenas. Okay, so you went to consulting. What was it about consulting that really captivated you? Why did you decide to go to Deloitte to begin with, and then later McKinsey, I guess?
Yeah, so I think Deloitte again is good from like I love the notion of being on projects and learning a lot in a short amount of time and learning from amazing people. Like even my manager at Deloitte was an IIT grad, brilliant, top of his class. Like I learned so much from him. So it's great to be around great minds. And then I think like the draw for McKinsey for me is they totally rejected me when I was an undergrad. I did apply for them, but they weren't accepting people from computer science at that time. It was business only. And
Right.
so I remember my last day cleaning out my apartment, and I had that rejection letter from McKinsey, saying, good luck, try another time. And anyhow, all those years later, I was able to land an internship there, when I was in business school. And I ultimately thought that that was the ultimate kind of polishing for an MBA, was
Mhm.
actually being at a place like McKinsey, where you just learn lots of different concepts from business live in short studies. Um, and I think it just teaches you a lot about structured thinking, executive communication, how to navigate stakeholders and complexity. So I learned so many skills, honestly, that has set me up to today. Even today, I use those skills every single day at work. And again, thinking about my toolkit and what I hope to learn to make a difference, that was a really big part of my journey,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
have those skills to then apply it for other things. Like, and you see, I've done a lot of community service. I've
Mhm.
used the skills for many of my community service projects, whether it's starting that small social support group or NGO for
Mhm.
people with disabilities. I used that thinking there to set aspirations, and I was also leading a poverty task force in my community. I used that structured thinking approach and stakeholder alignment approach to get the teams on board. So I really appreciate the value of those skills and applying it to other sectors
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
areas where you can make a difference. So
So, how do you rally people around you to have a common vision to make a difference in other people's lives, right? So we work with, especially consulting, we work with all kinds of people. Many people who are A type. There's no such thing as B type because no one ever admits that. Certainly no C type. But you have this vision to help other people. Is there a type of leadership that you follow, like that you favor? Is there a leader that you look up to as far as how they rally people around your vision? Like what do you do about that?
yeah, so first of all, I'm very much about the servant leader kind of mindset.
Mhm.
That's, I think, really important because that translates to so much of what you do. And I admire so many leaders, to be honest. It's too many to list.
Okay.
And I think earlier on in my career, I used to look at those leaders and be like, why am I not like them? And then I just realized over time that, like, be yourself, that quote, right? Be yourself, everyone else is taken. And that we all have our own gifts, right, to bring to the table.
Right.
And I tend to kind of I've worked with some very dynamic, amazing leaders over time, and I take the best from them and see what
Hmm.
I can adapt and learn from into my
Hmm.
own style. And then, like, rallying people around you, I guess so much of how I think about that is hiring well in the first place.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we get 3 million applications a year at Google, 3 million. And so it
Three
turns out,
million?
yeah, a year,
Is it
right?
Google Canada or Google
No,
Global?
Google overall.
Okay, because there's like 30 million in Canada, so a tenth of it's like a tenth of everyone every 10
Probably a
goes.
lot of people, but even, I mean, even if you were to size that down and
Yeah,
assume that Canada is kind of 5 to 10% of it, I don't know that that's the right answer, but roughly earmark
yeah,
that. That's a lot of people that would apply for,
yeah, yeah. No,
call
for
it,
sure,
1,500 jobs. So
for
that's like
sure.
the acceptance rate is really low,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Overall.
yeah.
So, but it turns out it's actually very easy to find intelligent people.
Hmm.
Like, knowledge is available. You can find intelligent people. I don't find that hard, but what I'm pressure testing for is values,
Hmm.
right? So I always say it's like on a 2 by 2, right? If
Hmm.
you're to hire, where's the rock star zone? Rock star zone is like the y-axis is like capability and impact, like your expertise, right?
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
y-axis, and the x-axis, which is the X factor, are your values. And if you've got like phenomenal values and you're got capability,
Hmm.
the ability to drive impact, like that's called rock star zone. You can have so much impact at scale. And the
Right.
values part is about integrity, about being a team player, having
Mm-hmm.
compassion for others, wanting to serve. I actually ask that question when I interview
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I want to understand that people understand the world outside of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I try and hire really well. Like, so for example, my own team through COVID, 100% of my own team, without even asking, had served the community through COVID. And I was like, wow, I didn't even ask them to do that. They
Right.
were naturally inclined to serve the community. I'm like, that is the best. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, and I think it takes a certain degree of introspection, and it's a lifelong discipline that you need to have to not take yourself too seriously, even when the going gets really tough. And that's a big lesson that I learned in my career. When I left corporate, like I left Accenture, that was my last kind of my last major stint was at Accenture, and to leave with the goal and vision of empowering and enabling people as a coach. That's what drives you through tough times, right? Because the going is never easy. I mean, anything that's worthwhile doing is tough, right? As the saying goes. And so I think that idea of what you just mentioned there is really, really applicable. Let me ask you then, based on kind of people that you work with and what you know about leaders now, what values do you think are missing the most? Like, what values do you feel are, in short, that really need to be there that aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for many leaders, I think one big opportunity for leaders is just knowing their why and being more oriented to purpose because I think the best leaders now are not just about making profit, but are understand the responsibility we all have on, taking care of the environment and the social impact of what we do.
Hmm.
So I think that's a big opportunity for most leaders is just like articulating that why, learning, leaning into it, and inspiring teams around that. Because I think also the
Right.
next generation wants to work for leaders that care about those things genuinely.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd say like, for what other attributes are leaders missing? I mean, at the end of the day, like Eric Schmidt, who used to be the former CEO of Google, said it best, which is like revenue solves all problems. Results matter.
Yeah.
Like if you can drive results, it really does matter, and it does
Okay.
pay off in a meritocratic environment.
Right.
So, I mean, I think storytelling and all that is important, but driving concrete results is also really, really, really important.
Yeah.
And I'd say the last thing, which is, I guess, a learning through COVID, is we talk a lot about empathy, but
Mm.
I think we need to extend that further and lean into compassion
Okay.
instead, or by extension, not instead. And I
Right.
think the distinction between those two is I'm so glad that empathy is a more of a mainstream topic now
Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
certainly wasn't, Simeon, when you and I probably started our undergrads, but
Yeah.
it's become more of a mainstream topic around best managers are empathetic. But
Hmm.
in my view, the best managers are actually compassionate.
Mm.
I mean,
Yes.
they're empathetic, but they're also willing to do things to support you and take
Hmm.
action to help you, change the game, change the situation.
Yeah.
And
For
so
sure.
that's a key attribute I think that we can all lean into a bit more.
Yeah. I interviewed Anthony Veal, several, so CEO of Deloitte Canada now, several interviews ago, and he talked about the difference between an advocate and a mentor, right? And he said that the advocate is someone who will step in the gap for you, who actually kind of pave the way for you, kind of. And that ties into what you just said earlier, which is you can't have outcomes if you have people that are just lost, right? And people who are lost can't be found, can't be guided without mentors, without advocates. And that goes back way to the beginning of what you said about the importance of mentor. We have a comment here, a
Yeah.
question from Mandeep. Would you say that much of your approach to leadership is rooted in your culture, upbringing, and values informed by the community that socialized others?
Hmm.
Okay.
Great question, Mandeep. So I can take that away. Does that work?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, actually, I was thinking about it. This has been a huge part of who I am, a huge part of my identity. I'm part of the
Mhm.
Smiling Muslim community, and I very much grew up in my faith. I would go to prayers once a week. I went to Saturday school. My parents were very involved in our community and community service,
Mhm.
and that kind of those values were integrated into our family life. The values of ethics and meritocracy and being generous with others, and that absolutely shaped who I am. And I think that math professor came from my community. Actually, I met him
Mm.
at our prayers. Actually, And so that had a profound impact on me. And also like being agnostic in how you help and who you help. I think that's been a big part of how I think about things, is that
Right.
we're very, very blessed. And I'll share one small thing with building on Mandeep's question. I think one thing that was really powerful for me is I had the chance to go to India about 7 years ago and go
Right.
back where my great grandparents were from.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so eye opening for me. And I also had the chance to go to Africa about 15 years ago with my dad and my grandmother.
Right.
And just seeing my great grandparents' journey from India to East Africa to England to Canada, I mean, I couldn't help but feel so blessed to like be standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
Because that's how you can advance, right? Is like all these people before you made all these sacrifices. And I think that's been another big source of inspiration in my life, is just recognizing how blessed I am to stand on the shoulders of giants. And then also, I think the other giants of our time are all the scientists and technologists that have invented these incredible technologies that allow us to have this conversation today, to have the
Yeah.
internet, to communicate with people. Like, can you imagine what COVID would have been like without technology? I mean, we would have all really
We
struggled
would
to
have,
get
I
connected.
think we would have all been really bad or poor bakers, first of all.
Yeah, exactly. You need YouTube for that. Exactly. So, but yeah, on a lighter note, yeah, I agree with you. And yeah, it was very much, top of mind, understanding my culture as well a little bit more closely, given that now I was born in England and I grew up in Canada. So
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I
Gotcha.
understood all of that more.
No, that's great. And I think so much of who we are is ingrained in us by our culture, our upbringing. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was an ex colleague of mine, one of the firms, and he said, if you want to find out the nature or some explanation about the nature of how you relate to your boss, think about how you related to your parents growing up, because he says that there's some semblances of how you react to authority and how you react to expectation of someone who's your elder that kind of get translated over to your workplace, which I found absolutely profound, because then I thought, well, there's some things that are applicable, some things that are not, right? Because I'm Chinese ethnicity, but a lot of my colleagues are not, right? So, but I think that really speaks to like how we are brought up in our family really kind of drives how we behave and how we react to certain situations, right? Um, so on that note, then, question I have for you about struggling and decisions that were really tough and maybe some difficult times that you had to go through, decisions that you had to make that were not easy. Could you share with us like anything that you remember about, like insofar as you like to share, obviously about your career, or, what was the struggle first of all, and then kind of how did you make your decision, and ultimately what was the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always been in. I think there haven't been as many women in the industries that I've been in, is a way of saying that. Like when I was a developer, by the time I got to my last year of computer science, 10% of my class was female. We didn't have a lot of technology consultants at that time that were female. So I think I've always been in this kind of gender imbalance situation. I think as I got more senior, though, I think what I found hard at times is just like is having a voice sometimes at the table. And
Hmm.
and I found that hard at times because I would sometimes share. And here's one thing I found really difficult at times is, a you have to have. We talked about meritocracy, and Simeon, I think your point earlier was a really important one. Sometimes you feel like you have to work even harder
Hmm.
and have even more degrees, have even more better results just to be considered.
Hmm.
And sometimes I can imagine for many of us, it has felt like a lot of work and effort to just kind of sit around the table. And then when you're at the table, one thing that I have found disheartening at times in moments is not having an equal voice once you get to the table.
Right.
And so what I've done in that setting is I've reached out to my mentors to ask them how they've managed it. And I've
Hmm.
taken comfort in knowing that it's actually quite widespread for women. Even
Right.
very powerful senior women sit at tables where their voice is not treated as equal,
Right.
and just how they've navigated it. I actually read Indra Nooyi's book on,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't remember what her book is called now, but I read the whole thing, her biography. But
Yep.
just hearing how she became the CEO of Pepsi and how people would overlook her all the time, and
Yeah.
how she would share an idea with a male colleague, they would say it, and somebody would say it was brilliant. And she's like, that was my idea. So I think, look, the workplace is changing. I think it is a common, thing that women have to navigate through. And the
Hmm.
other thing that I've been doing is thinking more introspectively myself. Like, what do I need to do better to
Hmm.
have my voice heard? Like, how can I be more brief, more impactful in my communication? style. How
Mm-hmm.
can I build on other ideas to like give other people voice as well, to also demonstrate how that could be done?
Mm-hmm.
And then if needed, I have had one-on-one conversations with colleagues over time,
Right.
kind of say, look, this is my perspective. Here's how I was thinking about things,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of working through those kind of points of, the differences
Yeah.
in one-on-one settings to then make the broader forum easier.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say that generally I've been very lucky at Google. Like Google's a very inclusive place, so you can actually have those conversations very openly
Right.
at Google. So that's been great. But of course, there's been moments, and I also serve, the telecom industry. I've gone into board meetings where I'm the only female there, for example.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's like interesting. So anyhow, I focus on what's in my control, which is preparation, being tight on communication, and then finding my ways of building that voice.
Yeah. I think it's not easy, right? And my female guests have, to some extent, all have expressed in some way, shape, or form that kind of a struggle, and and the way that it's been dealt with is very different, right? But at the end of the day, it seems to me that the pattern of responses has been, know why you're there, and remember that you're there for the reason that you are there for, right? And actually, to be honest, I think being an Asian in some sense, for me has been that kind of an issue too. Is naturally we're not kind of trained to be confrontational. That's I'm being a very stereotyped person about, but that's true from my upbringing, and so something that we have to work through. Um, Mandeep goes back to service to others, and I think this is a really important. Like, these are really important questions. In talking about this next generation, right? So, service to others, serving the community, we before me, is this a trending narrative that's today's new hires like to belong to, or are they authentic and truly believe in and like the mantra? He says, I struggle to find these traits today, but it's very much let me hide this, I can't see. It's very much a large part of the noise around me. So I struggle to find these traits today, but it's very much a large part of the noise around me. So I guess he's asking about, these traits that you're talking about. Is it part of this generation that you're finding, or do they find it truly to be authentic to be service to others? Or, and he's saying that it's difficult to find sometimes. I think well, he's a professor, Mandeep, right? I know him personally, so I think some of the refers back to the next generation of people who are kind of going into the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, Mandeep probably has a better perspective than I do, right? If you're a professor, you're kind of seeing the next generation more closely. I mean, I do mentor a lot of young people, and on my own teams, I guess I'm screening for it. So it's actually self-selection bias,
Right.
right? So I have a bias to actually hiring people that have those attributes. So I'm like, am I getting a true perspective on the world? Probably not. And the people that reach out to me for mentoring are a lot of kids from like TKS that want to change the world. So I think that my view is maybe very narrow, but I have a lot of hope that I also believe in the fact that some people are just force multipliers in the world.
Okay.
And when I say force multiplier, like what that one individual do will have this magnifying effect on the world,
hmm hmm
equal to that of a million people that may not have that,
Yes.
that we orientation, let's say.
Yeah.
So I think I've been blessed in the sense that I've kind of interacted with a lot of, let's say, force multipliers that are young people, where I'm like, wow, our future is in great hands if we have young people that have that orientation to serving and making that difference, and have that kind of technology at their fingertips as well to
Right.
apply to big world challenges at scale. But that would be my comment if I was to be,
Yeah.
mindful of what I shared earlier.
There's a quote that I've heard, and I really believe, and I'm going to butcher it, but basically the essence is that whenever there's been sort of a tempest of change, right, in history, at the center of it has been a person. And so I think that's what you're saying, is that there's always been leaders who will say that I have a vision, and not even getting stuck with the solutioning around that, but thinking that it's the right thing to do, will just run ahead, and the tempest kind of builds around them. If that timing is right, if the circumstances are right. And I think that's what you're saying. The force multiplier. I would, even so far as even go one step further, say that we should all try to be
Force
a
multiplier.
force multiplier in some way, shape, or form, right? In our context, and whatever it is that we can do. Um, is dare to dream big. And obviously there's common sense, there's timing for everything, but when you can and if you can have the situation is mentor someone, help the community, serve in the arenas that you've been doing as well. Let me ask you this question about your involvement with the social circle and the different causes, and then going back relating that to the corporate world. So you're an angel investor, all this to do with money, right? And then here is all this a lack of money, right? Sometimes it's getting support for that. Like, how do you bring the worlds together? And like, because it's rare, right? It's rare that someone truly puts so much time and effort into building causes, and at the same time, so much of their time is devoted towards, you know, the big bad whatever you want to call it.
The for-profit. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, how do we reconcile it? I think at the end of the day, money can solve a lot of challenges, and money talks. And I think one of the reasons why we have inequity in the world is because we don't have enough people from underrepresented groups sitting around those tables. And so my lean into venture capital is to have a seat at the table to learn how all of that works, because we know, for example, in venture capital, only 2% of investments go to female-led enterprises.
Okay.
2% of global VC investment.
Wow.
And so when I learned that, I was like, no wonder we don't have female entrepreneurs succeeding at the rates that male entrepreneurs do. And so I was really lucky to end up as a investment committee member for Blue Ivy Ventures. So I've been part of that venture capital fund for some time. They asked me to join that investment committee, and it's been fascinating to see how due diligence works, who's pitching deals, et cetera. Because longer term, that's one of the aspirations I have, is to actually run a venture capital fund for underrepresented groups, and in a way that drives results, where you've got like a triple bottom line. You don't just make money, but you also hopefully help the environment and people.
Yeah.
And I think, understanding how it all works is really important, because I also am a big believer that one of the ways, there's kind of two big things I think about in addressing poverty. Obviously, education is one of the single most powerful forces for breaking the cycle of poverty. I think many of us can recognize that and see it. Right. I think the other piece of that is giving somebody dignified work, a dignified way of earning their own money. And that's where I think like entrepreneurship comes in as well, is that entrepreneurs can actually employ people, give them dignified work. Yeah. And dignity is such a big part of like what brings people out of poverty and can support them. So that's kind of how I think about all of that. But I still want to remain very grounded in the nonprofit arena, working with NGOs, understanding big topics like public health, because I do think there's also a huge intersection point as well. That, for example, technology applied at scale can help address some of the challenges around public health.
Right.
And that technology make money, but it can also address inequities in the public health arena as well. Like, for example, access to healthcare. So I see that crossover in a few different ways. And I see that skill set and that network as very important for achieving my longer term goals of really making a bigger impact in this space.
Yeah. And you can't really have one without the other, right? You can't, money talks, as you were saying, but it also pays the bills that you need to run an organization, right? Yeah. So any charity, any kind of cause that you're trying to support needs that funding behind that. I think, your skill sets are rare in that sense, because it's not always clear in most people's minds about how do you reconcile going from one committee, for example, of venture capital or whatever, angel investment, to, let's say, talking about, well and waters and and I think that's amazing. I think that's an example for other people to learn and to kind of see that as an example of what that could look like. So on that note, then my maybe one of the last questions I have for you is, what's some of the advice that you would give? So to two groups, right? One is people who are kind of just young in their career, 5 to 10 years into there. And then if you were to give your peers some advice around, and advice from your own like career or whatever it is, especially those who might be struggling a little bit with their identity, thinking about, what should I do next because my function might be phased out because of automation, all that. What kind of advice would you give them, to start, stop doing, continue doing, whatever it is?
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter group, I guess my peer set. Yeah, I know technology is changing so much. I mean, my kind of advice would be to lean into technology, and technology is transforming every industry as we see it. And it's better to lean in, work alongside it, than to
Right.
be on the other side of it and scared of it. And that includes every industry possible, whether you're an artist in law, in business. Technology is going to be such a key part of it. And I think the leaders that are going to excel are going to be comfortable with technology and also the change management aspect of it. I'd say, the second piece is really around knowing your purpose and your why, because that will unlock all of your beautiful gifts that everyone's been given. If you know that, it will point you in the right direction, and it will inspire people around you to want to work with you and to make that happen. And then I guess the last part is just, thinking about your own contribution and what you hope to do, like longer term, I think is really important. Like, how can we leave that legacy behind?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's partly connected to the why, but that piece
Yeah.
around legacy, especially if you're like me and over 40, is an important piece to think about, because life is short and it's so important to be intentional about what we do on a day to day. So that was
Mm-hmm.
be my three things. And then I guess for my younger self, I suppose the three things I would share.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the first thing is I would share. I wish I was more self compassionate with myself. I think I
Self-compassionate.
Yeah,
Okay.
self compassionate. I think that I put a lot of pressure on myself
Okay.
to achieve and drive and do all of these things. But I wish I'd had more self compassion. And I'll give you two kind of thoughts on that. One is, like, I strongly believe comparison is the robber of joy, and that's a quote by Roosevelt. Comparison is the robber of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do a lot of that comparison, which I think can happen when you're very driven, it
Mm-hmm.
actually lacks self compassion, and you can be very hard on yourself.
Hmm.
And a big part of self compassion is also mindfulness. I wish I had learned to meditate sooner and
Okay.
more consistently earlier on. So that's the first thing, is around self compassion. Second thing is just getting comfortable with technology. My earlier point, like, technology is going to transform every industry and every aspect of our lives, and we see that. We don't have to go far to notice that. So
Mm-hmm.
just getting comfortable with it and understanding how to integrate that into your life and profession, I think will set you up for long-term success. And
Right.
then the last point I'd say, there's one or 2 points. Sorry, I'll have two last points. One is I'm reading this great book called Range,
Mm-hmm.
and it talks about how we will need multidisciplinary thinkers to help us solve big problems over
Right.
time.
Right.
And so developing that range of experience, as you can see, I've had a very varied career track and path, but
Mm-hmm.
that range has really allowed me to, over time, build that foundation to really make a bigger difference over time. So I just want to encourage you to develop that range, learn lots of different things, gather lots of different experiences that help you learn and grow, because those will be little building blocks over time that really
Mm-hmm.
create that platform to make a difference.
Right.
And then that last part is, like, know your why, make that your fuel and
Mm-hmm.
inspiration in life, and amazing things will happen for you if you connect that to your own,
Yeah.
capability and expertise. Then the world is your oyster, I guess.
Yeah. Finding that why, we talked a lot about that. It it really is a lot easier said than done, right? And a lot of the why I find, and I'm not plugging my own TED talk, but I did give a TED talk on this. What My why was found because of failure, and to be honest with you, I
Mhm.
think that is one of the best teachers of why. Is sometimes society or the world expects of you, let's say, five things, right? If you're going to be a consultant, a Google leader, you have to be five things. But your why may not be those five things. Your why, what might be one or two of those things, or it might be something completely different. And the times where you don't do things as well as you could have are really good times for you to reflect on, why is that the case, right? Was it because you didn't actually care, or because you tried really hard but you couldn't do it, so try again, right? Those are really kind of reflective points that are good to think about. Mandeep had one more point. He has great praise for you. Natasha's vision, her purpose, and her approach to leadership are rare, and I would echo that. Yeah, when I hear you expressing yourself, it's a very focused, kind of a singular view of how it is that, yeah, it's like your vision board, right? To have sort of these milestones. My last question for you is about that milestones. Do you continue to set for yourself now then, as you go ahead, saying that, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you said earlier on that your goal is to own a venture capital piece, but like in your life, are you doing this for, personal life? Like, how does that work for you now?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I've got 5 life goals. The last one I shared with you is my last goal. So I
Okay.
only have one professional goal, and that's longer term. That's like in 10 or 15 years. And I try and make decisions that, are partly in line with that. But my other four goals are all about like self actualization, achieving my highest potential, and helping other people do the same. That's my fourth goal. But my number one goal is to be an amazing mom to my daughter
Mm-hmm.
and to help her achieve her highest potential in life and to learn as much as I can from her. That's
Yeah.
actually my huge part of my whole life is doing that for her and
Right.
making sure that when she grows up, she sees me as a role model as well in her life. Um, and then I have obviously goals to support my family,
Yeah.
be present for them. And
Yeah.
then a goal I have around just serving, how many people I want to serve and how many people I want to improve quality of life for in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I've been very fortunate to work on our public sector business. So I increased the number over time because I was able to get closer to that number that I had set for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do
That's
is I have these kind of big 5 life goals that are like my North Star for all of my decisions in life, including when headhunters reach out and offer more money and more people to lead and all of that. I think about my 5 goals and I'm like, would that take me off course? And many times it would,
mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you could make more money, but if that meant like 50% less time with my daughter, it's not worth it. And
So
I'm really, really clear on those kinds of things.
how do you know that your goals are correct though? Like how do you know when you maybe should adjust those goals a little bit slightly? How do you know you're on track, or how do you know those are the right goals first? Like your North Star is the right.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do a lot of like self introspection and I do meditate. And I think I crafted those goals now 6 years ago.
Mm.
And I've basically fine tuned them only since
Mm-hmm.
then. So I actually every year go back and look at them and I make sure they still make sense. And
Right.
I have these high level goals, but I also have like a spreadsheet, like a 5 year
Yeah.
plan that ties to that to then try and like put it into action. So it's not just a big vision board with a bunch of pictures and big 5 life goals, but I've
Yeah.
detailed it out quite a lot. And the reason why I guess I know that they're right is because they help me make decisions and they provide that clarity in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really important. And I can wrap with like a quick story on that,
Mm-hmm.
if that helps.
Yeah.
Like a few years
Of
ago
course.
before COVID, Michelle Obama came to Toronto, and
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to go, but none of my clients could go because they got seats with basically all of my competitors. So I was like really upset that I couldn't take them. Anyhow, a colleague and friend of mine reached out the night that Michelle Obama was in town and said, "Hey, I've got an extra ticket. Do you want to come to the show?" And I really wanted to go. But again, I thought about my life goals, and my number one goal is to be an amazing mom to my daughter. And so I thought, like, I already told my daughter I'd be home that day for dinner. And so I said to him, no, I can't. I have other plans. Basically, he's like an hour, like half an hour later, he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. So I go home, I open the door, and my daughter runs to me like she had not seen me for 100 years. That was the most magical moment. And that evening, I think we had like mac and cheese for dinner, collected leaves in our backyard. But honestly, that's how I knew my goals were right.
Yeah.
It helped me make that's a very micro first world problem decision that I had to make. But in that moment too, it just makes everything easy and clear. Like
Yeah.
obviously I wanted to be there, but this was way more important. And to my daughter, that meant everything that I was home to be present
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah. Would you agree with the comment that you can't have it all then?
It's interesting. Well, I guess to an extent, but it's like, but what does having it all mean? And I
Right.
think we need to redefine success. Like I used to think success obviously was owning a Mont Blanc pen apparently and all these things when I was 17. But now I realize success is about like loving relationships around you, being there for
Yeah.
your family, having a meaningful career where you can make a difference and use your platform to impact society in a meaningful way. Having your kids and your family members admire that, right? And see that
Mm-hmm.
as a
Mm-hmm.
meaningful part of life, and just like spending time with people. And I think through COVID, I feel like has been the ultimate clarifier of what's important in life.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yeah.
that's why, of course, headhunters are reaching out to everybody in the technology industry, probably gets like ten calls a day.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think it's not always easy to find that right balance of having an amazing job and then having all that time for life as well. And I think the next generation cares about this too. And what an amazing work experiment we have now with most companies not going back 5 days a week, but having
Yeah.
that better balance now going forward. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. Yeah, for sure. And I might, if I have the honor and privilege of getting your time again, get you to come back and speak about that. But
Sure.
Anyway, I'm going to end off. Thank you so much for that, for those insights and that story. So I'm going to end off the way I always do, which is a couple of rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, what's your alter ego profession? If you weren't doing what you were doing, what would you be doing?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would probably be working on at the United Nations or some other NGO working on something at the intersection of climate change and poverty or public health. Yeah, or public health, something that really gets to inequity and solving that. And I feel like one of the NGOs in the world, the UN, the World Bank, somewhere like that would have a pretty big impact on that.
Gotcha. And what's the name of a book or a movie that would best describe you?
Maybe range. Well, range is a good one, I think, because I'm trying. I still need more range to develop, but I think range is good. A good descriptor, because I have many interests and many hopes, and have been, trying to build skills over time that give me range and an ability to have bigger impact. So I think range is good.
And what's one word that you love?
Compassion.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
I think if we're all more compassionate with ourselves and others, the world would be a different place.
Right. And what's one word that you hate?
Oh, good one. Oh.
My guests usually say so many words come to mind, or no words come to mind, which is hilarious to me. Which one are you?
Well, I was like, I don't know if it's cheating, but I was going to say I don't love the word hate too, because there's just so much.
Okay.
I feel like there's just so much negativity in that word.
Yep.
And there's contempt, and there's an us versus them in that word, and I think that often fuels polarities in people and disagreements where people can't see eye to eye. It's like it gets to that point.
Right.
And so far, it feels like the opposite of compassion. Actually, that's why when you said which word do you hate, the reason why I was like, I feel like I'm cheating. Is it hate?
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Or
you do that one too.
Uncompassionate. Okay. So last one is, what is one COVID hobby or habit that you've developed?
Well, that's easy. Cooking. I was really, really bad at cooking before. So the joke in my family is when I would make eggs, I'm like, did you want it with shells or without? That was always my joke, because I was very bad at cooking. So I think I've gotten better, because now people eat my food, and then the fire alarm has not gone as much off, like maybe only once through COVID, whereas before, like if I was to do a year-on-year comparison, it would have been like 10 times. Yep. And then I've had served eggs with no shells repeatedly since the onset of COVID. So I think that's good progress.
That's really good. Yeah. And guess what? You wouldn't have probably been able to do that as well without technology.
Yeah, right? For sure. So, and good food. Thank goodness for good food.
For sure. Well, Natasha, thank you so much for your time. It's the top of the hour now, so I want to respect that. But yeah, and hopefully the audience, if you're watching now or post-broadcast, you would have really picked up and been inspired by a lot of things that Natasha has mentioned. And I always say, on behalf of Natasha and my guests, feel free to reach out to her. She may not actually want that, but I'm going to say reach out to her and just give her a comment or like, and if you have enjoyed what she has shared, which I have tremendously. So anyway, Natasha, thanks so much. Stay behind them. I'm just going to put you in the backstage, and we'll wrap up after. Thank you.
Thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Well, that was amazing. And just one of the things that really stuck out to me about Natasha is just her singular focus on not one particular kind of cause per se, but just the whole idea of compassion, the whole idea of, working really hard, but not only for the purpose of, for your own benefit, really for the benefit of serving other people. And compassion is something that I think, needs to be shared, right? It needs to come from inside and shared with other people. And much like what she was saying, setting the goal to do that is a really important part of our lives. It actually is what gives our work life meaning, to be honest with you. One of the things that I talk to my clients about is your unique value proposition has to have impact in it. So where is it that, you need to be where you're supposed to be? That's really the honest truth. And you have to figure out what that is for you. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me this week. And I'll see you real soon. Take care. Have a good weekend.